Good morning and welcome everybody to Hacking HR's November series. Today's session is a year of learning, celebrating success, value, results, and lessons in 2024. I'm so excited to be with this panel today, and we'll welcome them to the stage in just a moment. But first, I'd like to introduce myself. I am your moderator, Lauren Lefkowitz. I'm an executive coach and fractional HR consultant. And I work with executives and leaders who have gotten into sort of a mundane place in their workplace, and I help them figure out how they want things to be. I have 20 years of experience as an HR executive and leader myself. And now that I've introduced me, I'd love to welcome my panelists to the stage so that we can get introductions going and get our conversation started. Welcome in, everybody. So glad to have you here and to be able to talk about something that we don't talk about very much when we do the year in review. I think a lot of times when we do the year in review, we talk about what did not go right, what do we need to fix, what do we need to get to next year that we didn't get to this year. So I love that our topic today certainly includes lessons, but also really includes celebrating success, value, results, and how things went well. So if you're out in our audience and you're listening now live or to the replay, pay attention to this and think for yourself and your organization how you can bring in the positive as well as the lessons to move forward. So let's start with some introductions. And Sally, I'm going to start with you and I'm going to ask you a question. I'd like you to introduce yourself, tell us where you work and what you do. And I know that you have a track record of leading organizational change and strategic HR practices. So how have you applied lessons you've learned into your initiatives in 2024?
It's a big question. Okay, let's start with the introduction. My name is Sally. I have been an HR practitioner for just over 15 years, turned entrepreneur, let's say. So currently I run HRWise, which is a cloud-based HRIS solution. We're based out of Canada. I'm currently in Montreal, so good morning from my viewpoint here. How have I applied? Honestly, this year, I think my biggest lesson learned has been AI, and Jamie can speak to this because we've been on a few hacking HR conversations already. So for me, it's been to not only accept it. I mean, it did start with the acceptance, right? We've all had the resistance to that change at some point in time, but accepting it and then starting to play with it myself so I could have firsthand experience of what it means before we start having conversations. So I would have to say that my takeaway this year has been heavily focused on AI conversations and what it means for the future of our practice within our profession.
Thank you so much, Sally, and welcome. Sheila, I'm going to come to you next and ask you to introduce yourself. I know that you are an expert in benefits and HR communications. And so I'd like you to introduce yourself and share with us a lesson that you believe is crucial for HR leaders to carry into 2025.
Awesome. Thank you. My name is Sheila Kruger. I'm the former head of global benefits at Zoom and currently consulting with startups in that benefit space. And I am in Phoenix. So where it was 44 this morning, and I thought, oh, I hope my plants didn't freeze because I was freezing. But anyway, I think one thing to always keep in mind with communication is, multiple channels. Because not everybody takes in that information the same. Not everybody checks their email all the time. And don't be afraid of the post office. I've had some of my biggest successes by actually sending out a snail mail to people, which was great. The whole KISS, keep it simple, stupid kind of thing. In healthcare, we always talked about lowest common denominator. We weren't able to send one thing to the doctors and another thing to the nurses and another thing to the janitorial staff. So we had to remember that we had to write to that person that might not understand as much as somebody who's more educated. So in the US, the average reading grade average reading is 7th to 8th grade, so you've got to keep that in mind. 43% of our adults have low literacy, and that can be, even if you're well educated, that can still be the case. So, and that's not much better around the world. In the UK, the average readings is 9 years old. So, just those kind of things to take into account.
Thank you so much and welcome. And over to Jamie. Welcome, Jamie. I know that you are an HR executive with more than 15 years of experience creating collaborative work environments. What's a success story from 2024 that stands out to you, and how does that inspire future initiatives for your team?
So good morning, Jamie Conrad, VP of People in HR at Trust Radius. I've been here about 3.5 years. I've got about 15 years of experience in HR, healthcare, and in the tech space, and really optimistic about 2025, even sitting here on Election Day in the United States. For us, a couple of things that stand out internally. We've gone through some of the same challenges that you hear about with other tech employers over the last couple of years, and we've had a couple of challenging years right along with the rest of the industry. Our executive team at the end of 23 made some significant decisions around pivoting our business and what we were going to take to market. And we had to go down to a core group of people, and there was rifts, and we were taking this new executive direction and product direction. And we launched earlier this year, and we've had some amazing early indicators that our new product offering is going to be the game changer going into 2025. And so, when I think about how that resonates with our team and looking forward to 2025 with eyes wide open for all of the potential pitfalls as we do in HR, I also like to remind the team that this is really important for us to celebrate. We've overcome. It looks like we're going to continue to overcome. And I think it inspires our employees to think more about that experimental mindset, that sometimes it's okay to try new things, even if you're not sure if they're going to work. Sometimes it's okay to lean into failure as a learning opportunity and not be afraid of how you come out of that. And I'm excited just to see how that permeates into the culture in 2025 as we think about growth mindset and building a flywheel that makes us a little bit faster. I also think that it's important for us as HR leaders to think about business more holistically. And so I also want to mention what I would consider to be a business win, although it could be controversial, with SAP's integration of Gen AI with some bigger tech giants through their generative AI assistant, partnering with tech companies like Apple, Amazon, NVIDIA, to cross-collaborate and leverage AI functions through various functions, including supply chain management and finance. And just this, I think they're setting a really great example of cross-collaboration holistically for the adoption of Gen AI and the impact that it can have on strategic business outcomes.
Thank you so much, Jamie. And Colin, welcome in. So glad that you're here. We're still in the introduction phase, so I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself and also answer a question. And your question is, with your experience in driving HR and DEI initiatives, what significant lesson did you learn from a challenge you faced in 2024, and how is it going to help you shape your future strategies?
Well, it's really great to be here, and it's good to see all of you. And I'm really sorry that I'm late. My name is Colin Mincy. My pronouns are he and him. I help run a boutique agency that's focused on the employee experience and arming leaders with tools to be accountable around building safety and trust at work. The answer to the question is undoubtedly about capacity. I actually am a living, walking, breathing poster board for burnout. And I'm one of the really lucky people that really got a second chance and am better as a result of it. And so I'm really hyper focused on ensuring that people don't have to go through the things that I did to get back to being great. So I would definitely say the lesson for 2024 and 25 and 26 and 27 and so on is really having honest conversations with myself, with my family, and with my work about, how I can do great work and still take care of myself and my heart. And I think, keeping in mind that if we focus on all of the things that we have done, it helps us to curtail the need to do all of the things. So capacity and talking about what those boundaries are with those around you so that they can help sustain you is the lesson and the motto for the foreseeable future.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm so glad to have all of you here and such a variety of backgrounds and industries. And if you're listening now and you have questions as the panel is sharing, please feel free to add your comments or questions in the chat. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to integrate your thoughts into our conversation. So let's start with when you think about reflecting on the year. How do you celebrate success for yourself, for your team, for your organization, and how do you bring that into your organization? And as each of you answers, just go ahead and come off mute to answer, follow each other's mute buttons, and I'd love for everybody to answer.
Great. I love this question because I think one thing that I've really seen a lot is that managers are not great at this. People leaders are not great at this. And a lot of times you'll see companies that are just listening to, here's what the CEO thinks we should do. And it's like, well, let's talk about how does that really affect people? So for me, it's either shopping or going on vacation when I have a success. Those are my two things I really love to do. For my team, I always love to just part of the shopping fever, but you see little things out and around that really resonate with you that a coworker or a team member would really enjoy that. And it doesn't have to be expensive. It can be an enamel pin or whatever. And I really enjoyed those. But my biggest thing always was just writing little handwritten notes. And again, you'd think I worked for the Postal Service, but sending out notes in the mail to people that just let them know how much they were appreciated and really being very specific about what it was that I was thanking them for, because it really makes a big difference. And people don't get that from hardly anybody anymore. You don't get that personalized kind of feeling. And as far as celebrating successes for your company, I think as we become increasingly more remote, it's really important that be focused on community and social interactions. So, whatever you can do, and that's tougher and tougher as we are more remote, but there are certainly plenty of things that can be done either over Zoom or, localized groups that can get together to do things. I know during COVID, we did for our Christmas party, which used to be a big blowout that everybody flew to Denver for. We just got an allotment of money for everybody on our team. And so here in Phoenix, we just all went to Durant's for dinner, and it was just wonderful. We took our spouses, and it was just really nice to spend the time together. And it was the first time any of my other teammates had met each other. They, worked with them on Zoom, but they hadn't actually met them in person. So just, little things like that. I think it's all about specific recognition and being very cautious, not cautious, but very generous with your feedback when you are celebrating that success.
Yeah, I love those examples, Sheila. I also like to vacation, and so traveling whenever possible. One of the things that I do whenever I've like ended a big project or successfully landed a communication strategy that was maybe more convoluted than you like to think about, I give myself permission to disconnect for a certain amount of time electronically. It also helps with burnout, Colin. So if you're looking for tips and tricks on fighting burnout, that could be an avenue to explore. So I'm more on the introvert side. So giving myself that permission to just sit back and have space for myself instead of worrying about taking care of everybody else has become one of my celebration rituals for sure. As a company, in coming through some of the hardships and the tough times that we've gone through, we are hoping to position ourselves to bring everybody together next year in person for the first time in a couple of years. And it's really meaningful to our employees. It's something that they've, continuously asked for over the last few years, and we just haven't been able to financially take care of them in that way. And so I'm highly optimistic that that's going to be a 2025 accomplishment and thing we're going to be able to do with our teammates. So I'm really looking forward to that.
I could go next, piggybacking on what everybody else said as well. On top of it, we are very remote, so we've implemented a tool called Applause. Shout out to them. It's a really great engagement platform that allows you to give each other recognitions, and with the recognitions, you can buy stuff from their marketplace. So oftentimes, because it isn't in second nature for us, I will kind of shout out my team member privately to be like, hey, thanks for doing this, or I really appreciate this or that, and then realize, okay, I did it privately, but I could have done it on Applause as well. So I tap into both. But recently it's as little, it doesn't even have to be a huge win, but we've got a Teams group that where we ask each other questions. Hey, has anybody dealt with this? What do you think? How would we do that? And it happens to be like the same few that always help each other out. And I do want to motivate everybody to help each other out. But I just took a moment to reach out to one of my colleagues and tell her how much I appreciate how dependable she is and how much her colleagues can depend on her. So I think those personal recognitions remain as important today as ever. So that's one thing. The other thing that I found for me personally this year is to see that non-success is not necessarily failure. So what I've realized over the last year or two is there's seasonality to my job specifically. I'm not necessarily doing internal HR anymore. I deal with a lot of HR, but I'm not doing it internally anymore. So there is a seasonality to my job. And I think it used to be that 2 or 3 months in a row where it felt slow, it felt like failure. Whereas now with that introspection, it doesn't feel like failure anymore. It feels like permission to breathe, permission to do different things, to tap into a different role that maybe I don't get to play all year long. So I think that's one thing for me that I would call a win in and of itself, is realization that seasonality is not failure. And I love to travel as well. For me, it's not necessarily a driver, because it's going to happen whether it's been a success or a failure. I'm doing it. It's a necessity at this point. But other little wins here and there, whatever is of interest at that moment.
Yeah, I think all of these are great idea. I'm snapping on the engagement platform that Sally is just talking about. I think it's not only a great tool, but I think it's good to normalize that we can celebrate people in ways other than a promotion, because we can't promote everyone, and in other ways that aren't salary increases, because we can't, unfortunately, pay everyone what they want to be paid. So I think normalizing ways to celebrate people is a great way to build community at work. The other thing is, we need to normalize celebrating people who use all of their personal time and who actually are active, right, responsible, and active users of the company's leave policies, so that people are taking breaks and getting rest and returning, hopefully more focus and restored. And the other piece is we spend so much time doing course corrections and assessments on things that don't go right. And that happens so often that we actually don't talk about the things that are in place when things go well, and how we take those learnings and normalize those in our practices and our experiences. So I think part of your question about what do we do with that success is, well, we bottle it up and we talk about what made it successful, and we try to replicate it so that it becomes, or things like it become, more of our normal than sitting around and talking about and navel gazing about the things that didn't go well.
Yeah, such great thoughts. I think, I heard a lot in here about how to celebrate, rest as an activity, disconnection as an activity. We think of, I think, rest and disconnection a lot as sort of like fatigue driven only, and choosing those as activities, choosing to celebrate, choosing to use your personal time. I love the idea of rewarding people who actually use their time. And I also want to acknowledge that, and I heard it sort of woven into your answers, but I want to bring it out to the forefront, that there's an opportunity to self-celebrate. We do a lot of encouraging people to recognize other people and give kudos and go into systems. And I think the systems are amazing to recognize others. There's also an opportunity, and a tool I've used is starting a meeting or starting a one-on-one with, what are you celebrating about you? And whether that's personal or whether that's work-based or whether that's an accomplishment for the team that person had a hand in, it is really a practice to recognize ourselves and celebrate what we do, instead of humbling down and thinking that all celebration and all recognition is outbound. So let's talk about expanding that to our teams. One of you said managers are typically not great at recognition. We're often chasing a problem. We're often being in reactive mode. So how can sharing your own success stories, your team's success stories, company, organization success stories among teams and throughout the organization enhance collaboration and knowledge sharing within the organization?
I'll jump in on this one. I think it reinforces the desired behaviors. You're setting the example and leading with the desired behavior that you're wanting to see on your teams. And I love the idea of celebrating PTO, Colin. We've enacted we're encouraging people to share their photos when they go on vacation and talk about their experiences, especially if they're leaving the United States, because we're mostly US based. And so we're hoping that employees will share their collective experiences and their cultural differences, and have that be part of our normal conversations in community building. So I love that. So I think when we take a moment to recognize successes and celebrations, and if we can tie that to specific behaviors or different outcomes, that it reinforces what's valued in the organization, and that helps to set clear expectations for how we show up to work and how we build community. It encourages employees to emulate successful behaviors, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the work specific behaviors. It can also be who they are as people and how they choose to celebrate their successes, not just work related. It encourages employees to align efforts with business goals when you can, and the company's goals, and it helps to just have that as part of your culture and your community. So figuring out different ways to reinforce those behaviors and show up as the leader for the behaviors that you want to see from your teammates, I think is a major way that it enhances that collaboration, and it allows for people to feel comfortable sharing, which then can not only be about their successes, but when we talk about knowledge sharing in an organization and showing up, it just allows for more open communication all the way around.
I want to piggyback on something you said, Jamie. That is so important. Maybe not success related, but you said showing up and when showing the right example in a way. So as leaders ourselves, if we want to respect our employees' time outside work, I know a lot of us will send the email, get it off our brain, sometimes even send the email and say, don't bother answering. But that's not it, because it's already landed in the inbox, and what they do with it is their choice. And you're setting the tone that it's okay to work at a certain time. So I think for us, it's setting the example of not sending the email outside of business hours if it's not absolutely necessary. Maybe do a send later. Showing the example to take your time off and to be offline if possible when you're away as well, so that we're setting the tone that when you take time off, we expect you to be able to rest and be able to regain your energies to come back fully loaded. So I just wanted to tap into that, Jamie, because it's such a great point to point out.
I think the other thing is, talking about not just celebrating the successes at work, but your personal things as well. I mean, I think when we adopted our kids, where I was working had like a company-wide adoption party for us, which was amazing because everybody, I mean, it sounds, this was in the early 90s, so, bear that in mind. But everybody brought clothes from their kids. And it was like, I swear we didn't buy clothes for those kids for probably 5 years. We sorted them all out by size. And every season we'd pull out the next size up bag and we'd try everything on. And it was just amazing. But we all met at a park and had a great time. And it just, having that kind of support and people knowing what's going on in your life, sometimes it's helpful. Sometimes you don't want people to know. And then when you think about it, if you were talking to people about what's going on in your life, maybe they'd have more understanding for, what's going on with you. Are you always late? Well, maybe it's because, you just adopted 2 children and they have to go to school in the morning, or, it could be so many things. But I just think it's really important to make sure that we are celebrating, everybody's private life as well, as long as they're okay with it.
It's all of these answers, all of them. It's why we actually, called our company Going Beyond the Work, right? Because so much of what has already happened to us and the fact that life keeps lifing actually informs the way we show up, and it informs how we respond to power and hierarchy and the state of the world and our national conversation. And I think that it's really irresponsible for us to ask people to forget about all those things just because the workday started, right? It's not realistic. It's inhuman. And we should be caring about and caring for the whole person. One specific thing, in addition to the great ideas we've heard, use one-on-ones. By the way, if you are listening or watching this and you work at a company where one-on-ones are not mandatory, you tell them I said that that's really bad, right? We need to have consistent, continued engagement between managers and their direct reports. And those conversations need to be two-way conversations. not what can you do for me and what are you doing for the business, but how can I support you? How are you doing? Are there things that are happening in life and at work that are hindering your ability to feel fulfilled and engaged? Do we need to reprioritize your workload? All of those things. And this isn't expensive and it doesn't take a lot of time. It just takes a consistent commitment to finding time to really just be people and emote and listen and support. And so leveraging one-on-ones to do this is also something I might recommend.
I just want to make a quick comment, piggybacking off of what Colin's saying. I think it's about time that we start normalizing being human beings in a workplace. We're long overdue.
Absolutely. We are allowed to be humans all the while doing excellent jobs. And Colin says is the new Simon says. So remember that, and send your information to your employees, to your teams, and let them know that Colin said. So moving into when you're looking at lessons from 2024, when you're looking at successes from 2024 and celebrations and all of the things that have gone well, how can you as a company, as an organization, ensure that those insights from the past year are translated into actionable strategies for 2025? And again, really focusing on not just, oh, we need to fix this, we need to fix that, but the insights that have made the organization richer. How can we really translate that into action for 25?
You know, I've never been at a place that's done a good job of this, but I have ideas. I really think, just like every project that I've been on since I was in healthcare, I insisted that we do postmortems. And it was really important. And we documented, what we were doing as we went through the process. And I think the problem that most companies fall into is that, or the rut that they fall into is, okay, we've done that. We don't need to think about that anymore. And there's no real history there. And, we don't all work for a company for 25 years anymore, where we're going to be there saying, oh, we did that once before. Let me tell you how we did it. We need to make sure that we're documenting the things that are happening. And I think one of the ways that you could do that is just to have people, your group, do an annual report. And then in that report, you can leave the breadcrumbs for project management, those types of things. And actually, right before I left Zoom, I just happened to hear a little whisper about a project that they were doing. And they were all, oh my gosh, how are we going to do this? This is going to be so much work. And I'm like, we just did that 3 years ago. We'd had that much rotation that nobody was there on that team that they put together to do it. And it's like, we did this 3 years ago. There's an entire project plan put together. Everything you need to know. Like, we spent so much money on the attorney, you shouldn't have to do that again because it's already done. So, just that kind of an annual report, and everybody could write one for themselves, right? And you could put them all together and like, this is our HR 2024 annual report. And that can include what we need to do better, what we still need to do, all of those things. But I think making sure that we're leaving those breadcrumbs for historical purposes, because it can really save so much time and energy and money in the future. So that's really what I have always wanted to do. And just because, that didn't happen, but maybe it can happen for you.
I agree. We do the same thing after every little project, and then we do it at the end of the year to initiate our next year's strategy. Now the whole team gets to participate, not necessarily in the details of the strategic planning, but in the kickoff of strategic planning to make sure that they've been heard. And I think what's really important is that I always start with our mission, our vision, and our values. And as big an exercise as that might seem, we as a group that, to your point, Sheila, changes. are a living ecosystem, and what we were living 3 years ago as a vision or a mission or values may evolve. And so for me, it's really important to start the conversation specifically with those high levels of like, does this still really matter to us? Is this really what we're striving for? And I feel like when we get everybody engaged on that core conversation, it makes it really easier to get their buy-in for some of the more lower level tasks that come out of strategic planning. But yeah, I think a big conversation about the wins, the losses, what we want to do more of, what we want to do less of, and the strategic oversight is a really great way to introspect on last and build on next.
I agree with that. And I think it's really important. Yeah, I think a lot of companies may go through similar exercises for, preparing for the up and coming year, whatever their fiscal year, calendar year, et cetera. And I think it's pretty easy to have a good kickoff, right, for the year. But how do you ensure that continues on throughout the year? What are those operationalized practices or cadences that you need to make sure you also put into place and have available for employees to interact in, that can help to make sure that whatever those strategies are continue to be the right strategies, as Sally was indicating, and that you're making those adjustments, you're responding in time to the market needs, and that you're continuing to have everybody involved in that strategy along the way. I think Colin's mention of one-on-ones on a regular basis, great way to ensure that that's happening on an individual level with employees and their managers. And then those managers also have a responsibility to show up as a management team, as a leadership team, to reinforce, hey, we're still working in the right direction, or hey, there's something that's coming through that maybe we need to reconsider our strategic plan. And so the more you can operationalize that throughout the year, and put practices in place throughout the year, the more successful I think that will be.
I so agree with that, Jamie. I think about how many times I've gotten an email about strategy and like, yeah, we're all gung-ho, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And 3 months later, it's like, what has changed? And if you ask somebody, they're like, oh, well, something else happened. And so we had to put our time there. And the employees don't even know, what's going on and why is that changing. And I think it's so important to keep people informed, because just like 3-year-olds, we all want to know why.
And if we don't know why, we're going to make up our own stories.
Such a great discussion. Sorry, go ahead, Sally.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Jamie, it's that typical fight you had with your husband but didn't actually have. It all happened in your head. So that happens in everyday life. It happens in conversations at work as well that don't happen but actually happen. So that was a great point, Jamie.
So we've been noticing and chatting a little bit in the background here on this panel about some of the language that we use, and a couple of you use the postmortem term for debriefing after an event or project or program or a year. And a lot of times when we're reflecting on how things have gone, we're using language that sets a tone. So what do you all think that, or how do you all think that the terminology we use impacts how we reflect on the year and how we plan for the next year?
Well, I'm going to back my way into the question because I'm not sure I have a fully baked answer, and hopefully by the time it comes, it comes. But the first thing that I was thinking about when I heard the question was, what is there to be aspirational about? Right? And that's actually not the right way of thinking, right? And I think as I was just coming on, I think Jamie was talking about how long the years have been since 2020. And we start a new year. I think I may have said a couple of times that this year couldn't be worse than the year before and was wrong. So I think that before we talk about language, I think we have to talk about our mindset. And instead of focusing on how short or long the year is going to be, actually really map out what a good year would look like and what are the things that I need to do, the spaces I need to be in, and the things that I need to actively work on to make that a reality. And then I can talk about how we do those things more specifically. I grew up in the finance sector, which is not being shady. So post-mortem is a term we obviously used quite regularly after a project implementation or a rollout or initiative or a change management function. And it does actually sound kind of morbid. I'm actually one of the people, I think I'm the first person that used it. And so what we really should be thinking about is how do we learn and take the things that have gone well and, like I said before, package them and sprinkle that good energy in other places. And the things that are not so good, how do we transfer from, we love to assess and criticize, but we hate to come up with solutions. And so how do we do that with the negative things? And the term should be aspirational. How do we aspirationally address these things so that we stay encouraged?
Yeah, I talk to my leadership team a lot about consistent language and messaging across the organization. That, especially in a remote workplace, it's easy. Well, I guess even in office, it's easy to have one manager giving one message to their group and another manager giving a slightly different version of that message to another group. And so we take active steps to, help with consistent languaging and giving our managers some of those talking points and FAQs to help with that. But Colin, I think you're absolutely right. The terminology influences whether I think the organization adopts that fixed mindset or that growth mindset and how it's being perceived. If you're talking about successes or if you're talking about learnings from maybe things that weren't as successful, again, you as a leader and the leadership team are setting that tone. And how do you want your employees to respond? And what are those behaviors, again, that you're encouraging with the terminology that you're choosing to use? So I think it's a major factor in the employee experience and how employees perceive the management team and their ability and the safety of speaking up.
I also think this is a place where you parent your children differently, and so you manage your employees differently as well. I think that depending on who you're speaking to, you may want to adopt different language that hits closer to them or that it has a bigger impact on the type of verbiage or conversation that you're having with that one person. But in general, like we started off here talking about postmortem, and it is quite morbid when you're maybe potentially talking about a project that was an outlandish success. I'm also thinking about, this was many years ago, but as a new manager, I thought I was being really, let's call it chill, if kids still say that, in saying like, I don't care, however you'd like, go ahead. And that, I didn't mean it like I don't care. I meant like, you have the reins, try it out, let me know. But it didn't come off that way. It definitely came off as like, this is a minute task. I truly do not care. Do whatever you want with it. And I think that's where words matter so much. And there is no way of correcting that unless you take a second at the end of each day and introspect. And no, I'm not saying overthink, but introspect on your day and was there a facial reaction? Was there discomfort? Do I need to dig a bit deeper and maybe have that one-on-one now before the person has the fight in their head? So yeah, I think there's a lot to say about language and conversation and mindset, but Most importantly, if you're having that engaged conversation regularly, it doesn't have to be weird nor awkward to get your lessons along the way versus too late or too much later on.
Thanks so much. Interesting little sidestep piece of the conversation to have. And so that brings us to the next question, which is a little bit more the how, right? So how can organizations create that structured approach to document and share lessons? And even as I say the word lessons, I think, oh, what did we do wrong? What are the lessons that we learned? But sometimes the lessons are positive. Often the lessons are positive. Like, what did we learn that we want to move forward with? So how do we move an organization to build a structured approach to documenting and sharing what we want to bring into 2025 and beyond?
Yeah, I think like what I mentioned earlier about that annual report is something like that is so important. I just really feel like I did have one employer that at least attempted it, but they just didn't do a great job of it. But we really did at that place, sit together at the end of the year and talk about, what happened and what did we get done, what did we not get done, and why. Sometimes there was just, it was a budget constraint, or even why did we do this percent of a comp increase instead of that percent, or why did this group of people get more than the other group, and just having all of that documentation in there so that somebody down the line could say like, oh, I understand there was a market reason for this. I just think it makes it so much easier to go back, and we did there several times, go back and say, oh, okay, we did this before, so yeah, we could do it again, or we could try a different approach. And so just having that information there, I think is really important. I can't stress it enough. I just think documentation is really, really important.
I think one of the things that I consistently see being missed in the how, when you think about it, is assigning responsibility for the documentation. Who owns the responsibility for this to be documented, and what needs to be documented, and how it needs to be documented, especially in small organizations when you're running lean and you're like, everybody, okay, go, right? And everybody runs in different directions to go do all their things. But then who owns that responsibility for ensuring that, what was discussed is captured, and what is being worked on is captured, and how it's being worked on is captured? Where is it captured, and why is it captured? And so I think that's sometimes the missing piece in operationalizing that idea, is just creating a sense of responsibility for and ownership for that documentation. And then, the transparency associated with it. How transparent are you going to be with what is documented? And is there a structure for that? Should there be a structure for that? Or do you have a highly transparent workforce and culture? So I think there's some significant opportunities there. But I think the important part is, like, regardless of those things, what are you trying to encourage by that documentation? What are you trying to, consider happening in the future with that documentation? And then those lessons, are you trying to prevent the organization from going down a path that didn't work previously? Is that a responsible thing to do, given how fast technology can evolve? And I think there's a lot to be considered in that, but I would start with just an ownership of it and see where that takes you.
Yeah, I think along with that, I would agree. And if you've done the exercise at the end of the year to kick off your next year with lessons learned and successes and all of that stuff, then I think what works really well for us is to repurpose that strategy and come back to it once a quarter and see where we stand. And so it is fully transparent, for better or for worse. And, you know, if at the end of the year we say that we've put this goal on hold, nobody's surprised by the fact that perhaps there's going to be no monetary compensation that goes with that goal, because we got too busy. Like, it's something that is open and discussed throughout the year. And if you think about it, even if they are very high level goals, your employees have impacted them somehow, one way or another. And so I think that's part of the conversation, is that you need to follow along the path that you've taken together as a group and introspect on where you stand throughout the year.
I don't really have anything to add. I think all of these things are great ideas. And you know, if you have strategy processes, if you have work plan processes, this is probably a good thing to supplement, right? Instead of focusing on what people are going to do, really being committed on how we capture those things and talk about those things and grow from those experiences. I think we've got to bake it into our already carved out processes, so that we're talking about what's been done and how, versus, you know, did we get it done? Which is, I think, how we've been operating for too long, to Jamie's earlier point.
Yeah, all great points. Being willing to document. We've got a couple of comments supporting what Jamie said about who is responsible for documenting, building the history. And Sheila, I think it was you who said earlier that there had been so much turnover in an organization at one point that there wasn't a written memory of having tried something a certain way. And I remember once sitting in a meeting in an organization that I had joined that had very high turnover, and somebody who had been there for a couple of years said to another person, well, 2 years ago, somebody did X, Y, and Z. And it was funny, but it also made us recognize that 2 people ago, we didn't have any documentation. So documenting, not just, we failed here, we didn't do this, we were too busy for that, but also this worked, this was successful, is so important. Our final question, and I can't believe we're already at our final question, but our final question is going to be, as we look into 2025 and beyond, what is a key takeaway for you? Something that you can take away from your own success over the last couple of years that you believe is going to be crucial for organizations to embrace, so that they can create this and foster this culture of success and continuous improvement.
So I'll preface this by stating I'm definitely a silver linings kind of mindset. And have won awards for promoting positive reinforcement in the workplace. So that's the lens that you're getting this answer on. And I'll try not to make it too cliche, but I think embracing change. You know, one of the things that Colin mentioned earlier was every year since the pandemic, we think, oh, this isn't going to get any worse. It couldn't get any worse. And then we're proven wrong, you know, and something else happens. I think we just need to lean into the idea that there's still opportunities and things for us to be excited about, for us to celebrate, for us to feel successful for, regardless of all of the things that are happening around us that we may or may not control. And so cultivating that mindset that views change as an opportunity rather than a threat, I think, can be really critical in creating that culture of success and continuous improvement.
And I think the one thing that won't change is, regardless of the technologies that come, regardless of the changes that come your way, the one thing that won't change is employee communication, empathy, the thing that we bring to the table, that personal human touch. Doesn't matter how much AI is coming. This is where you tap into your own skill set. And so I think it brings this whole conversation back together, which is be it celebrating success, struggles, or whatever else, communication is at the key of it all, and empathy as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think my last answer might have been probably the right answer for this question. So yeah, bake it into your strategies and work plans, and make it real.
And I think for me, it's a little about flexibility and providing the space for people to make mistakes. So that the whole conversation about psychological safety, I think, is a really critical piece to all of this, because we are going to make mistakes. We're all human. Our people are going to make mistakes. And one of the worst bosses I ever had taught me the best lesson, which was, you can make the decision. You have the power to make the decision. And if it's the wrong one, I'm going to be okay with that, as long as you can explain to me how you got to that. And that was very empowering, because it was like, okay, I really can do this. And he would turn that into a teachable moment instead of a write-up or a whatever, and he always did go to bat for anybody that made a mistake like that once they had gone through the process. And then he'd say, okay, well, here's where you went wrong, and it's okay, we'll get it fixed, but whatever. So I think just providing the space for people to make those mistakes. And you celebrate success, but sometimes you have to celebrate failure, because it's a learning tool as well.
I was just gonna say, I'm sorry. I've been good the whole hour. We need to stop pretending we don't know that the things that are broken, right? And because it's really not a mystery. And we keep talking about the same broken things and the same broken team dynamics, which are usually problematic people. And so I think in order for us to really be fully and meaningfully engaged in continuous improvement, we actually have to fix the things. And if we don't name them, we'll never claim them. So I think part of this is also like, let's call out what is broken and let's figure out how to fix it, so that we're not talking year after year about the same old things.
Thanks for that addition, Colin. And thank you, panelists. This has been such an amazing conversation. And I'll just tag on a little bit, Colin, to what you just said. And I think that very often when something is so broken, or feels so broken, or has been broken for a long time, and we sit down to figure out the fix, we all get blank stares at each other. And so, a way to maybe start looking at that as you're all looking into 2025 and you're looking at what's broken, you're acknowledging what's broken, is to start with the opposite of broken. What does it look like at the end of 2025 if we come into the end of 2025 and we're celebrating what's not broken? What is the direct opposite? And then, is that what we want? Because it's not always, right? It's sometimes that's a utopian world, or it's not a realistic world. And then you can ease into what is going to have us get towards that. Or do we even want to fix it, or do we want to remove it from our workplace? So thank you so much, panelists. This has been such a rich conversation. It's always so good to be in one of these rooms with amazing people. I appreciate your time. Thank you, everybody who watched, and thank you to everybody who watches in the replay, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Have a good one. Thank
you.
Thanks,
Great
everybody.
job facilitating, Lauren. Thank you.